We have a great panel for you all. This is Adversarial Networks. We're going to talk about what it's like to be a business operating on a permissionless adversarial network that is Bitcoin. I have an incredible panel with me today. I have Avthar, the lead technical product marketer over at Timescale, and I have Douglas, who's the CEO of Bitbox and Shift Crypto. Gentlemen, why don't we start with some introductions? Avthar, why don't you talk a little bit about what you do and Timescale?
Fantastic, thanks. So my name is Avthar. I previously co-founded and built a decentralized social media company that used Bitcoin as the identity layer. It used to be called Afari. And for the past 4 years, I've been at Timescale. We're a Postgres data platform for time series events and analytics. And we enable companies like Masari, Voltage, who you just heard from in the last panel, and Chainlink to build faster applications with crypto data at scale. And in terms of like how we interact with Bitcoin, time series data is everywhere in Bitcoin, from trading and price data to node monitoring and analytics to even mining device analytics. So have experience building on Bitcoin myself, as well as working with companies that do build on the Bitcoin network.
Awesome. Douglas, go to you.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I'm Douglas. I am the CEO, co-founder, original inventor of the Bitbox hardware wallet. It's a Swiss-made hardware wallet. We have a Bitcoin-only version. Yeah, I used to do everything, and now all I do is talk as the CEO, and happy to talk to all of you today.
Awesome. Well, again, I'm really excited about this conversation because this is the cutting edge for every single business that wants to get serious about Bitcoin, is how can they operate on this network successfully? So Douglas, let's start with you. What is it, if you're a business that's trying to incorporate Bitcoin, what mentality shift do you have to take in order to do that successfully?
Yeah, so we make security products for individuals, so B2C, but also as a company, we hold our own Bitcoin, so we have some experience there. And I think there's some parallels for companies that want to get into Bitcoin versus individuals. And I think when you first start, you need a different mindset, so it's different than fiat. And so there's some common misconceptions that exist. Like one of the most common we get is just with the wallet itself. Wallets may be a misnomer. It's more of a keychain. So the coins you have aren't in your wallet, they're on the blockchain. And so the keys are in your wallet that you use to unlock your coins to send it. And so these keys are extremely important. So another very crucial misunderstanding is that gone is gone. There's no one there to reverse your transaction. There's no chargebacks on credit cards and things like that. And so you really have to take a lot of care about this. It can be intimidating, and so that's why there's these third-party custodians that exist. That's maybe an easy way to start, but I think the important thing to note here is that these issues with security don't go away if you're using a third party. You're just transferring it to them. And these third parties do make mistakes. So every year, billions and billions of people's funds are lost. And so you have the same threats, and you have counterparty threat, which you have another adversary. If you want to take this this panel talk title.
Absolutely. Same question for you, Avthar.
Yeah, there's two, maybe three things that I'll add to Douglas's really brilliant response. So the first one is that I think when you think about building on Bitcoin as a company, you face the same build versus buy trade-offs that you face when you're building a regular product. And I think that one of the great things about the Bitcoin ecosystem is the fact that we have open standards, and we do have an open ecosystem and a strong open source community. And so you can build upon the work that other projects have. And I'll stress open source here because I think that we all just learned recently with the news of the Ledger wallet, the importance of open source and the importance of having this mindset where, if you do use these third-party products, you need to trust, but you also need to be able to verify. And so that's a key thing there when you're building on open source. And I think that, for example, a lot of companies have built these building blocks that you can use. You don't have to start from scratch. So for example, if you want to accept Bitcoin payments, just skip straight to Lightning. Like, that's a solved problem. If you want to do things that are actually on the smart contract layer, there's companies like Hero that have developed the Clarity smart contract language, and that's auditable and that's open. And so I think you need to be very careful about the parties that you choose to build on top of. And I think open source is a good proxy for something that you can trust and you can verify yourself. The second thing I'd say, just to end off on this question, is this idea of blockchain observability. And I think the idea here is that, like, when you build on Bitcoin, the state of the chain becomes your problem, and you need to be able to kind of monitor and keep up to date with, what's going on, whether it's not just the news, but the actual, transaction speed, the problems that are going on chain. So having observability and insight into that becomes very important. That's something, businesses need to take into consideration. It's another thing to monitor and another thing to take into account.
That was a really great answer and very, very detailed. I'm really glad that you mentioned, one, when you start using Bitcoin, like, the blockchain kind of becomes your problem. If you're trying to operate on Bitcoin without trust, you need to be able to manage and look into and have the right infrastructure in order to do that in a trustless way. And I'm also really glad that you brought up Ledger, because that was a pretty big, I would say, scandal in the last week almost. One of the most popular solutions out there, and potentially a pretty big breach of trust with a lot of their users. Let's stick with you, Avthar. Can you break down what happened there from your perspective, and maybe why that signals for closed source versus open source and why that's important?
Yeah, I think just to summarize, the quote-unquote scandal with Ledger is all about that. They had a product called Ledger Recovery that essentially allows you to recover your funds if you ever lose your keys. Now, Douglas made the point that key ownership is a key, mind the pun, thing to get your mind around, because once it's gone, it's actually gone. There's no takebacks, there's no reversals, and if you're going to build a user experience that allows people to recover their funds, that means that their keys aren't actually with the user, that the company themselves must have some insight into being able to kind of reconstruct that key or have ownership over the seed phrase or something like that. And especially when you're building these like cold storage wallets, where the whole idea is that, like, if it's your keys, then it's your coins. There's a phrase, not your keys, not your coins. By really breaching trust with people who want to have self-custody and cold wallet ownership, by saying, hey, actually, with this product, like, you're going to give up some of that. That really eroded trust in the community. And Ledger, as a company that, their wallet isn't open source, that puts a lot of questions into a product that actually gained a lot of popularity in the market. And so it really raised some eyebrows in the Bitcoin community.
Douglas, let's go to you. Obviously, you're in that same space.
Yeah, we're in the same space, so I don't want to say too much.
Makes sense.
But I will say, I think one of the big problems there, if you just ignore like the protocol that they're actually doing, is they had some miscommunication in their marketing. And where that stems from, I don't want to get into, but I think that's one of the big problems, where they said in the past, yeah, these private keys could never leave the secure element. And now what they're saying is, oh yeah, they always could. And so if you're a Bitcoin company, this open source, this transparency is going to affect you also. So try to be very careful with what you say to the public, because people can find out later what the actual truth is. And then, yeah, the problem with Ledger then is, of course, that's a violation of trust. And the whole point of a hardware wallet company, anyone, like we try to minimize the trust you need in us in a lot of ways, but there's always going to be some type of trust, because we're making a hardware product. And so to some degree, some more than others, you have to say, trust us. And now, if you lost that trust and you're still saying, trust us, in your closed source, it's going to be a challenge to kind of talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just to stick with, Bitcoin, the asset, and businesses having to deal with the challenges around custodying Bitcoin as the asset, using Bitcoin as the asset. Let's stick with you, Douglas. What complexities come around with maybe the traditional mindset around corporate funds, and then how that doesn't necessarily compute with Bitcoin?
Yeah. So I think maybe I can address this from a more practical point of view. And so the idea is you want to do self-custody. You can. Try it. And I'll say in some reasons why it might be more advantageous. But from a practical point of view, you're probably going to want to use a hardware wallet. Just a little secret, I know quite a few financial institutions that offer Bitcoin custody. And on the back end, they just have a bunch of hardware wallets in their vault. And you're probably going to want to do a multi-signature setup because you can't have a single person controlling all the funds. There's some pitfalls there, but if you do this right, you can do it easily. I would say one of the things you need to do is in advance write down your plans for, I think there's 4 categories. One is the setup, provisioning, also called the key ceremony. Another is how do you use it, who's signing, how many signatures do you need. Another is disaster recovery. So it's very important to have secure backups and secure locations that you can access, also not by just one person. And then another is just regular maintenance and upkeep. So for example, if one of the signers leaves your company, how do you rotate keys? Maybe annually check your backups. And I would say touching on the setup, you can research how to do it. I can't get into the details, but with multisig, I would recommend a little bit of a shilling our company. We have a blog where we actually investigated how to properly do multisig when we found that there's pitfalls in basically every way that people are doing it. And so this research has led to a Bitcoin improvement protocol. And so if you're interested in doing this, I would highly recommend to check out our blog. You can find the article there, shiftcrypto.ch/blog. Sorry for the shill.
Avthar, you want to jump in with maybe a follow-up on that answer?
Yeah, I think that this one, what I'm about to say, may be slightly controversial. I think that what Douglas talked about, I think that's the gold standard. Self-custody, multi-sig, cold storage wallets, I think that's great. I think part of the thing that I experienced when I was building my previous startup, Afari, is that there's a lot of friction in the crypto ecosystem in order to get onboarded. And so I think my philosophy around this and my perspective is kind of a middle ground where you need to choose the comfort level that you and your business have. And I'd recommend having a variety of solutions where, let's say, if you do want to put Bitcoin on your balance sheet, you have it distributed, let's say, some in cold storage, some with a custodian, just so that you can, my personal philosophy is like, you need to be able to sleep at night and sleep well, especially when you're dealing with your business funds. And I think for some people, that is the one end, as I mentioned, the gold standard, cold storage, self-custody. For other people, it's like, hey, what happens? Like, what if something goes wrong, et cetera? You need to be able to hedge your risk and again, sleep at night well. And so my perspective is that, like, really understand your risk tolerance and kind of choose the methods that work well for you and choose a variety of methods. So for example, 25% across different methods so that, if something does go wrong with one of them, that's not the end of the world. That's not your entire kind of portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, at least as an individual, and I know that it gets even more complicated as a business, your own self-custody, it's never, super easy or straightforward, and you kind of have to roll it yourself to some degree. Obviously, there's great solutions out there, and there's always this kind of trade-off between complexity and simplicity in your ability to, does the complexity of a setup give you more protection, or does it actually, cripple the actual system itself? Any comments about simplicity versus complexity and the Bitcoin, a business's Bitcoin cold storage?
Yeah. So I think speaking from our company perspective, one of the philosophies we have is our job as a hardware wallet company is to eliminate the trade-off between simplicity and security. And so every day we're trying to do that. That said, with the company, if you go to multisig, we actually don't recommend multisig by default to new users, just because there's so many complications in it and so many pitfalls. But of course, if you have a company of certain procedures, security procedures in place, I think it's inevitable. And so, yeah, I would agree. You get to that stage, you have to do some research. You have to understand it. And I think Avthar made some great points about maybe hedging your risk with some different levels of or different storage options. Also, just with multisig, if you do it yourself, you can hedge your risk a little bit by having multi-vendor multisig. What that means is you use different hardware wallets from different manufacturers so that you avoid any single vendor risk.
I think that was a great answer. Do you want to jump into that, or should we talk about developing on Bitcoin?
I'd love to chat about developers, so let's jump into that.
Yeah, so when it comes to Bitcoin, Bitcoin is obviously a money, but it's also a network that you can build on. Let's talk about maybe some of the challenges for businesses that are trying to build on Bitcoin and incorporate Bitcoin.
Yeah, so there's, again, 2, maybe 3 things to chat about here. I think the first one is just to highlight what you said, is that Bitcoin and these kind of open networks, they enable permissionless innovation, and especially with open source projects where you can build upon the work of other people, that's really important. And I think with that, a lot of developers got exposed to this security mindset, this adversarial mindset, where you need to be very threat-oriented and understand, what risks are you exposing yourself if you go down a certain route. You need to examine the various attack vectors. I think things like test nets are great to play around with here, as well as like audits and pen testing. That is a great mindset that a lot of developers, maybe got into Bitcoin for the kind of philosophy or just for the technology. They're getting exposed to this, so that's one mindset shift you're going to have to make. For example, the stakes are very high. We saw this a lot in the Ethereum and Solana networks, where if you're building smart contracts that have flaws in the way that the code operates, you can lose millions, if not tens of millions of dollars in a single evening and kind of bankrupt your whole business. So the stakes are very high, and so that's one mindset shift you need to make. I also think the other thing is that it's ideal to be your own verifier. So when you're building on Bitcoin, I encourage folks to run your own Bitcoin node, run your own Lightning node. That enables you to kind of get more visibility into what's going on in the network. And as you heard in the previous panel, Voltage is actually a customer of Timescale, so shout out to them. They provide really an easy way to kind of host these nodes and to monitor these nodes. And so I think depending on the level of technical ability of your team, there's different levels where you can self-host, you can use a node hosting provider, you can just monitor things as well on third-party sites as well. So there's these different levels that you can choose from, but I think having that visibility and understanding the kind of different threat models and the security mindset, those would be 2 things that I think are very unique about developing on Bitcoin.
Douglas, same question to you.
Yeah, sorry, could you repeat it?
Well, yeah, no. So, Bitcoin's obviously, not just an asset, but it's also a network. What does it take for businesses that are trying to develop on Bitcoin to do that successfully?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to interpret it, but the interpretation I have is like you're building on a decentralized network, so you don't have the counterpart to that is you don't have some trusted third party, some benevolent dictator, basically, that if you make a mistake, that can erase your mistakes. And so if you're making software for decentralized networks, you have to be very careful, very conservative. That's why Bitcoin core development takes so much time. There's so much review behind it. Because once you launch this, now you're launching it to this whole, your community, but also the community of adversaries. And so once it's launched, everyone's going to, there's going to be people trying to figure out how to backdoor it. And you see that a lot in the smart contract space over and over again. And so you have to be really careful about that.
No, I think that was a great answer. We just have about 2 minutes left here. I want to give you each one more chance to kind of give a last word about the subject matter, maybe talk a little bit about your businesses. Let's go with you, Avthar.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a great discussion today. Yeah, I think that as a business, whether you're thinking about Bitcoin from a balance sheet perspective, or if you're looking to build on Bitcoin, what I encourage you to do is to think about like one, your kind of risk appetite about like, okay, what is the liver of risk that you're happy with? And then two, with Bitcoin, again, go and look at the open source projects, go and look at the work that other people have done and to build upon that. Just a plug for Timescale, my employers. Timescale, again, if you're looking for a database that can help you store and analyze massive amounts of crypto data efficiently and want to join the likes of Coinbase and Masari and Chainlink, check us out at timescale.com. We're actually doing a 60-day trial, especially for Bitcoin attendees. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Awesome. And Douglas, last word for you.
Yeah, so being a security company, and hardware wallet companies in general, they like to talk about all the risks and threats and how you can lose money in lots and lots of different ways because, yeah, we're making products to help protect against that. But that said, I don't want to let that discourage people from getting involved in this space. And so we have a bias to talk about that because it's in our mind all the time. But I think, there's risks and opportunities in any new field, and I think the opportunities available in working in the Bitcoin space are immense and worth the risks and worth learning about how you can successfully deal with the risks.
Awesome. Well, that's all we have, y'all. Let's give these gentlemen a round of applause. This is an incredible panel. Lots of practical and good information here. So if you're a business owner, you're going to want to watch this one again on YouTube. Take some notes. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Miami, for the last 3 years in this amazing city. The whole world shut down, but Miami welcomed us with open arms. We want to show Bitcoin to the whole world. We are taking the conference on the road to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. Nashville. Bitcoin 2024 is coming to Nashville in Tennessee, a city that is known as a music and freedom city. Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville from July 25th to 27th.